Okay, it's 12 o'clock. So,
Mind if I eat while I watch this
No,
video?
go ahead.
Stacy,
I
would
have
you
to walk
mind
away.
muting, or do you want me to mute you?
Yeah, and you know what? I will do the same. Okay.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks. Good afternoon, and welcome to another installment of our ongoing Nonprofit Leadership and Engagement Series. I am Joanne Nazer, the Nonprofit Leadership and Engagement Manager at the Washington County Community Foundation. Thank you for joining us today to learn from our content expert about whether to rent or own for nonprofits. Thanks to Kathy Sable and Stacy Till from the Washington County Bar Association for supporting this webinar, since it is a law school for nonprofit session as well. It is my pleasure to introduce Jamie Coleche, President and CEO of the Mon Valley Alliance, which promotes economic development throughout the Mon Valley with a number of initiatives. I want to preface this discussion with that Jamie is not an attorney. He is not providing legal advice. So if you do need legal advice, please contact your solicitor or attorney that you work with. Thanks so much for being with us today, Jamie.
Thank you, Joanne. We ready to start then?
Yes, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, and thank you for all this participating in today's webinar. Certainly appreciate Joanne's invitation to speak with you all, as well as the support from the Washington County Community Foundation over the years of the Alliance and being able to add to our capacity and reach out to more and more folks that we can. So thank you very much. And again, welcome everybody. Today we'll explore the strategic decision nonprofits face when choosing whether to lease or purchase real estate. And throughout, I'll use the Mon Valley Alliance as a real world example to illustrate some of the pros and cons along the way. So our agenda for today, there we go. Right here, as I go through these slides, please feel free to jump on the chat or raise your hand for questions rather than saving them for the end. We will have time at the end for questions and answers, but at any point during these slides, please feel free to interrupt and ask any questions or make any points that you're looking to do. So again, here's our roadmap for the next hour. We'll start why, the decision matters and then dive into, the pros and cons of leasing and purchasing, followed by a little, visual financial analysis of the strategic framework. So, why do real estate decisions matter? It impacts a nonprofit's ability to deliver on its mission effectively. So, where are you at in your nonprofit, in your organization? Are you looking, is your nonprofit new? Is your nonprofit, in its growing stages? Is your nonprofit established? Those are things that go into whether you should lease or purchase. So, the long-term financial sustainability of the organization is paramount. Obviously, as we get into a lease, it's just like a car. Your payments could be lower. But if you're looking for ownership, your payments are going to be higher in the short term, but then, over the long term, it's going to be beneficial for you. So, the long-term financial sustainability of your organization is probably the first thing you need to look at. Mission alignment. What is your organization, looking to do? Is it a flexible organization where you're growing, you're implementing new programs or services, and you need adaptability of your space? That goes into the mix of leasing or owning, because leasing, you're limited of what you can do or not do with your property, and if you own it, you can transform it and to meet your needs. And then for operational, flexibility and community perception, having, your own established space goes a long way within the community that you're serving. And it also gives you that operation flexibility that I talked about, whether you want to adapt your property or your office space or configure it in, different ways to do whatever you're doing. I'll just take a little bit of time here to talk about the Mon Valley Alliance for those that don't know who we are. You see right here, our mission is to promote and market economic development and job creation in the Mid-Mon Valley communities. And we do that through three separate initiatives here. The Mon Valley Alliance, which a lot of folks know us from, focuses on real estate, industrial development, and those kind of activities. We have the CFS Bank Business Resource Center, which I am going to use as an example of the lease versus purchase. And the Business Resource Center is here for business, whether that's community business or small business, nonprofit business, to help guide those stakeholders in the Mid-Mon Valley towards progress. And of course, we have the Mon Valley Alliance Foundation, which is our 501c3 affiliate under the Alliance, that takes on different programs and special initiatives that are associated with grant funding. So, Mon Valley, the real estate. We we own a lot of property. We will own plenty of buildings, and we own and operate within a building, but we also own and lease out to other industrial partners. So our real estate activities have been focused first down at the Denora Industrial Park. That's where our organization got its start in 1965, whenever that steel mill announced its first U.S. closure by U.S. Steel in Denora. So that gave rise to the Mon Valley Progress Council and Middle Monongahela Industrial Development Association. And then 10 years ago, we formed into the Mon Valley Alliance and the Mon Valley Alliance Foundation. We've been involved in the build out and still in the build out of the Spears Industrial Park, where you'll find some big companies like GE in their expansion in 4th Street Barbecue or 4th Street Foods. Valley Tires headquarters are up there in the Spears Industrial Park as well. And then Alta Vista, which is our current project that is quickly coming to a conclusion with development where it's almost all developed out. So in each of these places, we own property and have significant real estate holdings in each. So let's dive into key considerations for nonprofits here. Again, mission alignment. You need to weigh, the mission alignment, the financial capacity, and the flexibility, and your risk exposure. Whenever you're leasing, you have a lot less risk if you're a good tenant. But if you're an owner, there's a lot more risk ahead of you that you might not take into account, such as taxes, ongoing maintenance, and liability issues, people slip and fall, and things like that that then become, upon you. So for nonprofits, you really, going back to this, you have to consider, what is your mission? What are you looking to do? How is your financial health? Can you take on the expense of being an owner? Because that is a lot of upfront expense. Or does it make sense for you to lease and get into a position of ownership down the road? And again, flexibility, what kind of flexibility are you looking for? And then obviously I talked about risk management just a little bit earlier, but that is a key component in all of this is risk management and knowing, what is ahead. Because for nonprofits, it's not like you could go out and raise your prices or, increase your fees or something like that to help, fill a gap for an unexpected expense. You really have to think that through. You have to budget appropriately, develop a sinking fund and items like that to safely analyze the risk that you have moving forward. So, getting into leasing, advantages, like I said, just like a car, lower upfront cost, you might have to make a month or two, deposit, security deposit. You know, it gives you the flexibility to relocate if you don't like your situation, where you're at, it's not meeting your needs. You can get up and leave, just like depending on your lease and the terms and conditions that you have. But for the most part, you can get out of a lease, whether it's at the end of that term or during it. There's usually options to be able to get out of a lease so that you could find a better environment, better location, to meet your needs of your organization. With leasing, I talked about maintenance. There's a reduced maintenance responsibility there that, somebody else can do. The driveway is going to get plowed, the sidewalks are going to get taken care of. If there's an issue with the HVAC, that falls on the owner to do. However, leasing means you have no asset. You have no building asset. You also, face rent escalation, which is usually in your lease, that you're going to have to build in, 2.5 to 3.5% in increased lease costs if you're leasing your office space. So you don't have any control over that. It's going to happen. And then you also have limited control over your property, meaning that, you can only do so much to the property to make it fit your needs. So, that's something you really have to take into consideration, that you have limited control over your property. And many here on the call may already realize that. But using a real life case example here with the MVA, we initially leased our office space so that we could stay agile while we were building out. I mentioned 10 years ago, our organizations merged and developed a new identity, which also had to develop a new strategic mission. So, leasing office space allowed us to stay agile and build out the programs until we needed a particular space. So in our formative years, this really minimized our risk. And the picture that you could see here is our old conference room in an industrial park. Kind of the conference room served as a kitchen, conference room, and everything else. And we had to make do with the space that we had. We couldn't knock out any walls. We couldn't, expand the footprint or anything like that. So, we're kind of stuck there, working within the bounds of our lease. So, but it was very helpful. And, again, in the formative years, in getting our traction, it allowed us to, free up cash flow so that we could pursue additional building projects, job creation projects, as well as small business and community capacity programming as well. So, again, it's similar to like, renting a house or renting a car. It's nice. You have those upfront costs, but there's only so much you can do with it because you're not the owner at the end of the day. I think that's pretty basic information that a lot of people would understand. But when you start weighing that in with your organization and its mission and its strategic vision, these are things you're going to need to take into consideration on a deeper level, rather than just saying, oh, it's lower and we can just keep getting by this way. You really got to step back and take a look and a deep dive into what your organization wants, where it's going, and consider, does leasing make sense? Maybe, or does purchasing make sense, which we'll get into next. So purchasing, obviously ownership, provides stability, control, and the ability to generate income through subleasing. For example, the alliance. I'll get into the alliances, getting ahead of myself here looking at the pictures. But, purchasing requires significant capital and ongoing maintenance. Market downturns can also impact property value. So, you have to, take those factors into consideration. But, you know, the advantages you have is you own the asset, you own the building, you have control over the property. You know, you can, you know, have no trespassing signs up if you want, because that's what you want. You know, and also, you know, if you have a bigger building that's outgrown your nonprofit, or not outgrown your nonprofit, but is bigger than you need, you know, there's an opportunity to sublease from tenants. And that is something that we have pursued and have done, and is worked out very well, being creative like that. But again, that's an advantage when you're purchasing, to be able to do that. However, there's high upfront costs. You know, you got to buy it. You might have to finance it. You know, you might have to make, you know, modifications up front to bring it into code. You know, there's a litany of things that really can drive up the upfront cost. And make no mistake, there are going to be upfront costs, and likely they're going to be high, and they're going to especially grow high over time as you start going down the road. So again, going back to the nonprofit, you know, perspective, are you able to, you know, swallow that upfront cost, and can you weather it till you see the benefit? And then finally, you know, the maintenance obligations. You know, if the roof leaks, you're going to have to patch it. You can't call your landlord to patch it. You're going to have to, you know, get that taken care of yourself, and there's going to be a cost involved. You know, the plumbing breaks, or there's a leak, that's going to be on you. That's not going to be on your landlord any longer. So, you know, there's a lot of obligations, especially, you know, communities where you have to maintain the sidewalk. For example, you have to make sure that it is in good working condition, you know, safe, so that people aren't tripping and, you know, getting hurt, that there's a public safety issue. So, you know, you have to really take that into consideration. And I will tell you, from our perspective, is we bought our own property here in Monongahela, and turned it into the Business Resource Center. Those are all factors that, you know, we knew were there, but we really didn't take a deep dive into understanding, you know, what we need to do. You know, the last thing we did, would want to do, is take a walk on the sidewalk and, you know, what does this mean? You know, you figure, you know, the municipality has to take care of it. But what you find out, especially here in Monongahela, you're responsible for the maintenance and the safe passage of that sidewalk, even though you don't own it. So that's one of the items that, you know, is we got into owning our own facility here for our operations. We really didn't take that into consideration, and lo and behold, it's something that we have to now replace our entire sidewalk. So, you know, an $80,000 project now is something that we weren't considering 5 years ago. But that project is now upon us. And again, you know, we developed you know, a sinking fund, you know, thinking and seeing the forest through the trees is building owners. So, you know, if we had to do this and we weren't really planning and preparing for it, it would be it'd be a tremendous hit to our operations budget. So it's just something you really have to, you know, look at and understand, that does this fit our financial health and our long-term growth? That's something that you have to look at. So looking at, you know, some of the pictures, you know, our biggest purchase was acquiring an industrial park that had no buildings, had no infrastructure to it whatsoever. So, you know, talk about risk management. That is a hell of a risk to take, being that, you know, we don't print money, and we're going to have to rely on partners to, you know, transform the project into what it is today. So, you know, a tremendous amount of risk went into doing something like this. Although we don't operate our offices within the park, we do own facilities there where we lease to companies, and you know, we also sell to companies as well. So it's helped with, you know, economic development and tenant recruitment by owning our own facilities. So, you know, for example, in an industrial park, if a developer owns all the facilities and you just kind of own the covenants and, you know, the restrictions that can go on in the park, and perhaps some land sales, you know, you have very little control over what that tenant is going to do at the end of the day. So in our case, we have a mix of owned properties and properties that we've sold off that are also leased. So it's a little bit of a mix, and I don't know how relevant that might be for this discussion, but again, it just goes back to the considerations you have to take as a nonprofit. Um, in that risk management. There's risk in everything. So I point this out because it involved risk in acquiring this land to develop out the industrial park. To a lesser extent, a few slides ago are showing the old conference room of the building that we had. And we decided that it was time to get our own property and have our own, you know, own. We come to the decision that we can do that. So what we end up doing was purchasing a former bank branch in Monongahela. It was a former community bank branch that closed in July of 2021, and we completed the purchase in November of 2021. What that has allowed us to do was to grow our organization and our mission in being, community and small business capacity builders. So, in our previous location, we couldn't host more than maybe, 5 or 6 people in our offices, not even enough for a board meeting. However, whenever, we got into the ownership position and we had the flexibility to redesign our property from an old bank lobby with teller lines and such, we were able to envision what we wanted and what we thought could help grow our organization. So we were able to invest a lot of money into the redevelopment of our office space, as well as our offices as well. That has really, provided a great benefit to the organization. Our productivity goes up. Whenever you're able to make changes yourself, whether you're decorating or getting windows painted or anything like that, you have the freedom to do that when you're in a position to purchase. So, but again, the disadvantages, just to repeat, because I keep talking about risk, and it's always something you have to think of as a nonprofit is the risk. And there are high upfront costs. There's um, a lot of costs that we didn't realize. We bought a former bank. So what comes with a bank? A vault. What do you do with that thing? Oh, that was cool whenever we were walking through, and oh, that could be a neat little, cigar room, or, a wine, store wine or something like that, or store important documents. But what you don't realize is you pretty much are stuck with something like that as the purchaser. You can't call somebody up to get rid of it because you don't want it anymore, and you have to deal with it. So our way of dealing with it in that example was to design our space around the vault and build outwards from it. So we're able to, maintain that. But, there's just little items. There was an ATM machine embedded into the wall of this bank, and we had to get rid of that. So, there's a lot of like legacy issues that you'll inherit, but you have to be aware of that so that, you're not putting your nonprofit and your organization into a precarious situation where, your operational funds become, limited, and you might have to make some tough decisions. So, thinking about these things, 5 years out, 7 years out is something that's important to do. So a little visual of, leasing versus purchasing. You know, the example here, shows a lease that starts cheap. But after about 7 years, the purchasing becomes more cost effective. Again, ownership builds equity, which leasing does not. At the end of the day, you're walking away from your lease if you end up moving on in anything that you might have had invested into it. So, looking at this example here, a 10-year cost comparison versus lease first purchase, $5,000 a month lease, just using numbers here, that may or may not be what the going rate is, but, at $5,000 a month, 3% escalation, you could see where your costs end up going from year one to year 10 to almost $80,000 invested into the property that you don't own, you don't have any stake in. However, if you're in position to purchase the property, and in this example, we use $750,000, which kind of equates to this leasing example. At a 20-year mortgage at 6%, what the rates are now, you put down, $150,000, you're left with a $4,300 a month mortgage, which is just a little bit less than the lease. Plus, you got the maintenance costs that you gotta take into account, especially your utility bills. A lot of times that's built into the lease. Taxes are built into the lease. When you're owning, those aren't built in any longer. So you need to, take into consideration your ongoing maintenance. So, at the beginning, you have basically a $5,300 a month mortgage, $5,300 a month expense on the purchase. But as you can see over time, that in that green line there, that amount stays stable, and you have stability and you have certainty throughout, barring any unforeseen events like a fire or flood or something like that. Obviously, you got to have insurance as well. But you could see, if you lease, it's good. It's like year four, it's kind of close, year five. But after that, you start to see that the lease just probably doesn't make sense if you were able to at the time, pursue an ownership position. So, and then again, you have a $750,000 asset, available to your organization. Your nonprofit, 20 years is not very long to own it outright. And then, nonprofits, if your mission is, to benefit society and people, you can apply for a tax abatement on your main operations of your property. So that's a benefit that you would have over a lease as well. So in our example here at our building, our business is helping society in many ways. So we were able to pass the different tests that are used to determine whether you can get a tax abatement. And what we have here is a tax abatement on our facility because we're benefiting the greater good of society. So you can only do that if you're in the position of purchasing and being the owner. So there's tax advantages to that as well. Do we have any questions thus far? I didn't really look at the hands up or the chat yet, and I'm kind of going through these slides
I
pretty
don't
quickly. Is
see
there
any chat
questions?
comments as yet, but feel free to put that in
Well,
or to raise your hand.
yeah, Jamie, if you don't mind, I think your presentation is right on point. Having worked, both as an owner of property that is leased and representing nonprofits, I think you're raising excellent points. And it really does depend upon the particular circumstances. But in regard to that issue of being tax exempt, so the situation where a nonprofit thinks that, well, I'm going to acquire a building and I'm going to lease out part of the building to another entity, which is not a nonprofit. Now, at least my expectation is that that portion of the building arguably not being utilized by the nonprofit would not be tax exempt. It would be subject to real estate tax.
You're 100% correct. So again, those are like kind of those factors that you would get engaged with your, attorney to, understand that, oh, if you're going to sublease and it's for profit, you're going to be taxed on that. But
Right.
also, taking a step back, there's no guarantee that you're going to be a tax exempt facility either.
Right.
That's something that the school district, the county, and the local municipality are going to have to agree on as well. But
Right.
kind of the point I was making is, you have that advantage as an owner
Right.
if that all works out.
Oh,
But if
no,
not,
Jamie, I
yeah,
think all of your points are are excellent. A nonprofit, before they decide to buy something, they really do need to think about it carefully, because you're absolutely right. The hidden, unexpected costs of a new roof, or a furnace, or, a plumbing problem, or whatever it might be, is something that can really disturb their mission and their budget.
It certainly does, and it also
Yeah,
takes away from time because then you're chasing down fundraising,
right.
and taking away. So, that becomes an even bigger burden. So,
Yeah. And
thank you
Jane,
for that point.
even the concept where a nonprofit thinks, well, we'll buy a building that's big enough that we can generate income by renting space. Well, once again, that takes the time and
Hmm.
expertise of becoming a landlord. And that in and of itself is problematic. So you're right. It's not one size fits all. It really is dependent upon the circumstances. So once again, I think your points are all excellent. Very good.
Thank you.
And Jamie, yes, thank you, Ed, for that. And Jamie, I don't know if you wanted to touch on that then for a nonprofit, that could be unrelated business income tax. And then they have that issue as well then.
Yeah, I'm not a tax planner or know if there's any tax obligations there, but um, maybe any attorneys on the call here could answer that. But I'm not sure that has an impact on the tax status of an organization. That's kind of like deferred revenue, other kinds of revenue generated. But that I don't know the specific answer to that, unfortunately, Joanne.
And I just threw that out there. So
Yeah.
as,
Okay.
as something to maybe evaluate and part of
Yeah,
the
and
risk that you're
just kind
interested.
of, yeah, and going into it, I mean, if you have a big enough property and you can, sublease, you can really reduce your mortgage, expense. You could supplement, some of your, program income, through that, your administrative costs. So there are certainly advantages of being able to lease out, sublease if that works. And of course, you got to have the right tenant. That fits your mission and your organization's goals and strategic objectives. You kind of want to be aligned in that same general mission, not specifically like, oh, we just do economic development. But if you're serving, in our example, if you're serving the greater good of the region of the Mon Valley, that is somebody we would want to talk to about, being a partner, and being a sublease tenant. And I just feel like that sublease tenant should be your partner in some capacity in your organization's work. So thank you very much. Okay. So using a structured approach, we kind of talked about, all of these different facets here throughout the slides and this afternoon's presentation so far. But you really need to use a structured approach to analyze your costs, planning for growth, considering community impact, and involve your board. These are all things that you really have to do. And the example that we're showing here is an office building that we built down in Charleroi, 6,500 square feet. And in this example, we had to take a deep dive in the financial analysis of whether to build this facility or not. And I think this example works well for nonprofits considering whether to lease or purchase. Here we're the owner and we're renting our space out to CareerLink and Southwest Job Training Services. But the steps that we took here are no different than the steps that we took in whether to decide to purchase our building or not and to continue leasing. So you really have to take, that deep dive into the finances. How does this work? What is the worst case scenario? Can we service our debt? You know, more than likely, if you're going to own property, you're going to probably have debt on it through the mortgage. If you have the money to just buy it, then probably not part of this conversation. You could just kind of do whatever you want. But you know, you really have to dig down into the financials and see how does that impact your organization, and can you take that risk financially? Because upfront you are going to be taking risk, and that's something you have to understand. So that strategic and financial risk is something you have to dig down on. But in this example here, it took us a good month, 2 months to go through all the scenarios of the financing and you know what that lease cost is going to be able to support this project that happens to be in an area that no private developer would ever build a building like this. But as a nonprofit, we were able to take that risk, you know, knowing that we needed less rate of return on our investment than you know a private developer would need. So um, you know, in this example, you know, we played out different scenarios. Could this be a medical office building? We took the time to do an economic analysis um, through IMPLAN. That's a statistics program, you know, kind of database run out of the University of Michigan to understand, you know, what does the workforce look like around there? You know, what are the highest and best uses based on other businesses that are in that area? And, you know, the only thing that we really came up with was medical offices. So, as we were deciding to build this facility, we had to take into consideration, are we able to get medical offices or some sort of you know tenant in that regard. So that really limited us down to you know one specific industry category. Um, and you know we kind of went through this and went through this, and this became a stopping point for us. So we knew the financials would work in our situation, but who was going to be our tenant was the big thing. And you know, was that tenant going to be a partner of the region? You know, how does this all look? And you know, the scenario planning is what took a lot of time. And you know, we end up finding a suitable tenant here with CareerLink that was able to take up the entire building that you see here. Otherwise, it was designed to be three retail type of spots, as you can see with those awnings. Um, Another thing you have to take into account is the community impact. Um, you know, will it help your organization's mission by being a part of the community fabric, by being a property owner? That goes a long way. You know, does the community want you? Depending on what you do, that's something you got to think about. And, you know, does it involve, you know, community, you know, fight or debate? That, you know, that's a stopping point too. You know, if you're not going to be popular or, you know, welcomed in a community, then that's something you have to think of whenever you're purchasing to, you know, establish, you know, office space or even, you know, to develop out your own space to lease out to support your nonprofit elsewhere. So, you know, understanding the community and engaging the community whenever you're looking to purchase is something that's prudent to do. It's something that we did in Monongahela to ensure that this is something that would be welcomed and would be productive at the end of the day. And then governance input is your board. You know, engage your board completely. Talk to them about, you know, all the pitfalls because it's easy to see, you know, the blue sky and say this is just a great day out, but put some clouds, you know, get some rain and snow and some weather, and ask the tough questions and go through. Does this work? You know, will this fool us? Will this put us in a precarious situation that, we can no longer operate. And engaging your board and the full board is been important in my work here at the Alliance. And I also suggest, that working relationship with your boards is taken into account whether you're deciding to lease or purchase. And I would trust everybody's board members would give great perspectives on the advantages and the disadvantages of doing one way or the other. So, some key takeaways here is, as Ed mentioned earlier, no one size fits all solution. Um, every nonprofit, every situation has a different circumstance that has to be taken into consideration. Going back to our situation here and buying this bank building, um, you know, we know that, it one size isn't going to it doesn't provide the entire solution. And we knew that we would have to do, some more planning and, more work to make our purchase into what we wanted. So, that takes investment in our situation. We were, beneficial in being able to partner with CFS Bank down here in the valley, that has purchased the naming rights of our building. That is an option that you can do as a nonprofit, is selling the naming rights. We established a good product here and a good mission, and been fortunate enough for CFS Bank to buy into that mission, which is now going to allow us to improve the aesthetics of our building, in addition to the interior improvements that we had already made and committed to. So we've been able to find a nice partner that buys into our mission and is going to allow us to make the improvements aesthetically, that is going to be welcome more by the community. The second point, the best decision has to align with your mission and your financial health. And, again, I can't repeat that enough. You just don't want to jump into something and it's going to harm your mission and your organization. Everybody is with their organization and leading them because they love and they have an inspiration for what that ultimate mission is. So the last thing you want to do is destroy that by taking a leap that is beyond the abilities of the organization. So it's got to be the right situation for your solution, but definitely can't say that no one size fits all to say, oh no, you should buy and own your own property and do this and that. That's just not the case that you can recommend to everybody. And then consider your long-term sustainability. With our building here and our purchase, it is crucial to our long-term sustainability for our organization. It provides obviously space and place. It also gives us standing in the community. It helps develop respect and trust, and that you're investing in the community that you're looking to serve. So we do practice what we preach in our situation, but you want to consider the long-term sustainability organization. Do you have subleasing opportunities, as we talked about before, that will help with that sustainability? That could be the thing that fits your solution. So you really have to consider the long term, and seeing the forest through the trees, so to speak. So that's kind of the presentation I have. I left 10, 15 minutes here for questions or answers, comments, or anything that I can help. I know us here at the Alliance and with the foundation, if any nonprofits or any folks are looking to sit down one-on-one and talk about the experience that we've been through, and talking about their particular situation, that maybe we could be, just an extra set of eyes or just another brain in the room to, point out some advantages or disadvantages and how they apply to us, and, how we see it working in other nonprofits. We're more than happy to, help anybody. But at the end of the day, it really does take, the effort of your accountants and your lawyers, to help best guide your decision of your organization. So with that, I'll open it up to questions, and you have my contact information here. I'm always an email or a phone call away to help. That's what we like to do.
Thanks so much, Jamie. We appreciate your presentation very much. Ed, I didn't know if you had a question or comment.
And no, once again, other than to say thank you, Jamie, your view reiterated mine, and it really does take a careful analysis of the specific needs for each of the organizations. So no, thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So, Jamie, I know I don't want to put you on the spot, but have you had some surprises? You were talking about, the sidewalk. I guess that's a big surprise. And can you
Yeah.
share of anything that a nonprofit could really need to look at?
Yeah, so I don't know if anybody's seen the Money Pit back in the day. I think it was in the 80s. Where they bought a house and everything just cost and cost and cost, and it's the proverbial money pit. You can look at it this way, and I'll share some examples. When we bought our building, we have some surprises. Oh, we have great front windows, a great view of Main Street, great view out back towards the aquatorium and everything. And we love that aesthetic. But little do we realize that those big, beautiful windows are magnifying glasses whenever the sun is coming up over the buildings and producing heat, throughout the day. So our summers get very warm here, and it puts a strain on the air conditioning unit for the facility. So, whenever we did our inspections and, did our run through, yeah, it's great. Windows are there. The AC units working well, but these hot summers that we've had that have really cooked like a microwave inside of our upstairs put a big strain on the air conditioning unit that probably took a lot of the life out of it that we now have to look at replacing. That we didn't think we would have to replace for 20 years due to its age whenever we purchased it. But we're going to have to look in the next couple of years to replace that air conditioning unit that comes at a cost of like 25 or $30,000 just because of the great windows that we liked and the view that we liked turn into a magnifying glass that really heats up the inside. Now, a solution to that is better windows. But there's a cost to that we're getting ready to undertake. And, we have $80,000 that we'll be investing into all of our windows so that they're, tinted and, can, be more efficient so that we're not putting a strain on our mechanical units.
Mhm.
Um, so there's a lot of pitfalls and we've experienced them, but you have to be prepared to get through them too. So it's something you have to always keep in the back of your mind and not get caught up in, that like a cat, that new, purchase and all the great things that come with it. You have to really, look at and understand you're going to have pitfalls. You're going to have, water infiltration, you might have pests that you didn't think about and things like that.
Mhm. Well, thanks. Thanks for being honest and sharing. And yeah, windows are beautiful, but there can be a cost associated with that. One thing I'd like to share is that there's a organization being established by some regional funders called Elevate NP, and they have just recently done several sessions on scenario planning, and that you really just given our current uh, challenges and funding cuts, things like that, you can't really think of maybe 3 to 5 years out. Maybe you need to think uh, shorter time frames, and that is, the scenario planning.
Mhm.
How can you get through this year? And to think of worst case scenarios, just as you said, that, everything, you see the blue sky now, but there could be snow and rain and hazards for the nonprofit, and that just to take a serious look at that and to involve, as you were talking about, the entire board, and that they have different perspectives on it.
Yeah, 100%, Joanne. And, just to touch on one more thing that you don't expect is snow removal. Um, when we bought it, we're like, oh, me and staff here would go out and, shovel the snow and get it ready. Well, think about it. It might snow overnight that snow might be 18 inches deep, 6 inches deep, and it is physically exhausting to get rid of snow. So you have to pay somebody to do that and to kind of be on call to maintain your facility to make sure that people aren't slipping and falling and having dangerous passage. So yeah, snowfalls and snow removal's a big thing that you think of, and you can't really budget for either because you don't know if we're going to have a lot of snow or not a lot of snow either.
True, true. Each year is different. Yeah.
Well, and
Sure.
one of the biggest things is, take a look at the big ticket items. A new roof. We just did a new roof on one of our commercial buildings, and it was $100,000. Look at the paving with the increase in the cost of paving. So, while it sounds wonderful to own your own building, unless you've got the resources and are disciplined and diligent about anticipating that it's not if they're going to need to be done, it's really when, and putting money away in order to deal with those issues is a challenge. There's no doubt about it.
Yep.
One thing you did mention, Jamie, too, is that, if you're a newer organization, and even though the Progress Council was established for years, the Mon Valley Alliance was a new organization and you decided to lease.
Yeah.
And I know there's probably no one fit all solution, but do you have any suggestions on, for newer organizations, smaller or mid-sized organizations, leasing versus purchasing?
Yeah, I would definitely follow the path that we did, leasing up front, and determining, it'll help you determine what your needs are, without having to invest all that money up front to then determine what your needs are. So, while you're leasing, there's nothing wrong with doing that for 2 or 3 years. We did it for, like 5 or 6 years. Again, there's no length of time that's good or not. It just goes into your circumstances of your organization. And I would feel like, a newer organization or anything like that, leasing is ideal to determine whether you're going to have long-term survivability in the work that you do and your funding streams will be consistent and everything. And at that point is where I would look at, does purchasing make sense for us long term? Because now I know we got something that's going to be here and we're going to be doing long term, and growing at the same time that, purchasing, makes sense for our long-term sustainability, but also for our growth intentions, as well.
Mhm.
Well, but another very practical issue is financing. When
Yeah.
a nonprofit, the idea of acquiring a building, while it may seem to be a good idea, well, unless the nonprofit's got substantial money that's available, and that's typically not the case, they either need to do a capital campaign to try to raise some money, or it becomes problematic from the standpoint of getting a bank to finance it, because who knows what the future is going to be. And if you're financing a building over 10, 15, or 20 years, what's the future of that nonprofit over that period of time? So that's certainly going to also impact the viable options for a nonprofit. And then put on top of that, even the environment we're in now with post-COVID and the potential glut of office space. If a nonprofit had invested in the office space, hoping that that was a good investment, and now all of a sudden, you look around South Point with buildings and office space available, that's not unique. Yeah, clearly, as Jamie said, and I agree 100%, it's really the circumstances, and it's really a case by case basis as you're analyzing the viable options. So,
And I think it comes down to risk as well.
yeah,
And what is your tolerance for risk? What keeps you up at night? Or, can you take that leap of faith and jump in? Or, even in leasing is risky too, as well, for an organization.
yeah. Oh,
You can get kicked
absolutely.
out. You can get kicked out.
Well, and yeah, and without a doubt. No, it's complicated.
Yes, yes. So,
Wow. I didn't think we'd get through an hour, but that is almost an hour, Joanne. It's pretty good.
yeah. Yeah, well, thanks so much. Thanks so much for on this particularly critical issue. I think at this time frame, as Ed was saying, there's a lot of available real estate, and is it right for your organization? Is it right to purchase or to lease? And I appreciate Jamie's willingness, and he put his information in there if you want to reach out to the Mon Valley Alliance and the team there. And I just wanted to let you know the next session of our nonprofit leadership and engagement series will be Thursday, January 15th, on how AI can benefit nonprofits.
Mm.
Dr. Michael Skirpin, a CMU professor and the executive director of Community Forge, a economic development work in Wilkinsburg. And just wanted to let you know about that. Thanks to all who participated in this session today, and thanks again to Jamie for his outstanding presentation. If you have
Thank
any
you for the
additional
opportunity.
questions, feel free to reach out to the foundation as well. I hope you have a great day and a wonderful holiday season. Thank you.